It's a challenging time to be a teacher. We don't get paid a lot, the days can be long and exhausting, demands from students, parents, admins, and districts can be intense. There is always room for improvement and there is always more to do. There are always new procedures to learn, new programs to run, new strategies to master. But it's when our fire burns the lowest that we remember our purpose. We teach because we're resilient. We teach because we're problem solvers. We teach because investing in kids is one of the highest callings we can imagine. We teach because we know that the classroom can be a place of magic and possibility. We teach because we have an unquenchable fire for learning and a passion to share it. We teach because our colleagues are some of the best human beings we will ever meet. We teach because we have an opportunity to influence the global citizens that will make this world a better place. If you're still on fire for learning and growth, join the Teachers on Fire Roundtable for conversations that will warm your heart, spark your thinking, and ignite your practice. You'll hear from real people and real educators with real solutions, not make-believe perfection, but ideas, inspiration, and a path toward change and transformation in K-12 education today. My name is Tim Cavey. I'm an 8th grade teacher, assistant principal, and the host of the Teachers on Fire podcast. I'm inviting you to join us at the Teachers on Fire Roundtable. Because you matter, your voice is important, and we are all better together. Good morning, Teachers on Fire. Welcome back to another conversation that will warm your heart, spark your thinking, and ignite your professional practice. I'm joined today by Morgane Michael. Morgane is an educator, podcast host, yay for that, and producer, a podcast host and producer of Kindsight 101, there we go. And she's the author of From Burnt Out to Fired Up, Reigniting Your Passion for Teaching. Morgane, I'm so happy to have you here. First of all, because as we talked about off air, our brands align so well. It's just appropriate that you come onto a show called Teachers on Fire. But I think this message has really never been more important than right now. So can't wait to get into that. First of all, if you are joining us live or on the replay, please say hello. Let us know where you are joining from, where you're viewing from this morning, and we'd love to say hello to you. We've got Mark coming in saying a good morning. Great to see you, my friend. Thanks for tuning in with us for a few minutes this morning. All right. Well, Morgane, welcome here. I love to start with this question. And again, it just lines up so well with our brands. But if 1 is burnout and 5 is on fire, how are you feeling today?
Well, first of all, Tim, I just want to say thank you so much for reaching out and having me on your show. I'm a fan and I'm just so delighted. And you're absolutely right. Our brands do align with the fired up and reigniting our passion. So I love that. Thank you for all that you do. On a scale of 1 to 5, was the 5 being the burnt out? Was that the scale?
I think 1 was burnt out and 5 was on fire. Yeah.
Well, I would say at this point, I'm like a 4 or 5. You know, I will say, you know, in the context of education, especially in actually just across the probably North America right now, things are pretty intense. But having been lucky enough to be in the classroom for the past week with real students, most of whom actually showed up at school, little K1 students, it was pretty amazing. You sort of have the chance to lose yourself a bit in the day and forget about what's going on the outside. So I felt like it, in many ways, it felt normal-ish in terms of as much as it can really in this pandemic. So that's where I'm at right now. How about you?
Yeah. Well, thank you for returning the question. Yeah, I would say I'm at about roughly, well, I'll say about a 3.5. 3.5. Okay. It was a hectic week, and I agree with you. I think our kids can really be that source of fire. I'm sure we'll get into that, but it was a sort of a chaotic week in terms of finding substitute teachers or what we call TOCs here on the left coast. So that added to my stress load. I'll be honest, it wasn't a fun week in that respect, but we made it. We made it through. Roland is tuning in saying hello from Ontario. Good morning to you. And Jenna Camp is here on Facebook. Jenna Camp Educational, good morning to you from LA. All right. Well, let's get into burnout, this word that we throw around, we hear a lot about. You've written a book about it, so let's start there. What is it, and why do you think it happens in education?
Yeah, so burnout is something that's been happening for years, and I think we're just seeing in education and many of the helping professional sort of careers where we're seeing a lot of people who are experiencing burnout. So, in a nutshell, burnout is not necessarily falling on your bathroom floor in a fetal position. Like, that's not necessarily burnout.
Right.
Burnout can actually be like a slow roll where you feel a heightened sense of irritability day after day. You, as an educator, you wake up and want to call a teacher on call or a substitute teacher because you just don't feel like you can muster the energy to get through the day. It looks like feeling frustrated by everything that feels outside of your control. It's about feeling a bit hopeless. It's about sort of having this idea that there's a permanence to any of the challenges that you're experiencing. And naturally, because of our current sort of environmental challenges around, COVID and all of the ricochet effects of that,
Right.
Many of us are feeling that. And so in my book, I have a checklist that kind of go through, like, are you feeling more irritable than ever? Do you not have a lot of patience? Are you feeling kind of sad, or are you feeling kind of overwhelmed by things right now? And that, in a nutshell, is what burnout is. And then what causes it, I think, is really this overwhelm in emotion, especially right now. So if you think of emotional, when you're processing emotions, you can think of it as sort of this tunnel that you're walking through. And if you don't process and name the emotions that you're feeling as you're feeling them as they come up, you can sort of get stuck in the tunnel and you get stuck in this cycle. And that cycle of unprocessed emotion can turn into burnout. And many of us are there. And so many of the mechanisms that we used as kids through whatever we went through, this very traumatizing time is causing a lot of that to come up. So this is a really good time to tune into that emotional processing and learn a new way and unlearn the old ways that may not be as adaptive to our time right now if we want to be successful.
Thank you so much. That was such a holistic discussion around burnout. And I think a word that jumped out to me was hopeless. And that to me captures when that fire really has gone out. A really interesting thing about COVID is trying to separate, like, what is due to the pandemic, sort of the added weight of the pandemic, and what has just always been a part, or let's say even in the last 10 years has been a part of this profession. Well, you in the book, Morgane, unpack the 5 R's that help us replenish our well-being and form that roadmap to reignition. So I know we won't have time to go deep on these this morning, but would you be willing to unpack these 5 R's for us that will give us maybe some tools and strategies to think about taking on this problem of burnout?
Absolutely. Yeah. So when I was writing the book, my publisher was asking me to sort of come up with a framework that would make sense, that would be somewhat linear, but not necessarily, because some of us can have different entry points at which we can sort of start working with the material in the book. And so really the goal of the book is to give you a roadmap to work through that feeling of burnout, whether or not you're right at that end point, or if you're just starting to feel it and you need sort of a refresh and you need that feeling of kind of tuning back into that wholehearted person that you are. So the first one is about reflecting. So it's kind of like tuning into, where am I at in my emotional state and where do I feel it in my body? And if you have trouble getting there, I have little tips and techniques on how to get present. So mindfulness activities and just really simple journaling prompts, very, very easy things. One thing I suggest to my people, when I do professional development, is just as simple as in your phone 3 times a day, do a little reminder that says, how am I feeling right now? Where do I feel it in my body? And what do I need right now? And it can be as simple as that to do the reflect. The second one is reframe. So reframing is sort of, once you know where you're at, we all have these narratives that we put on our lives and our experiences, right? And so reframing is about taking stock of those narratives and going, is that serving me right now? As the way that I'm sort of framing my life and my current experience, is that helping me out? And if it's not, this whole chapter basically helps you to reframe those unhelpful narratives. So through mantras, through sort of rethinking how to be resilient, some really easy tools and tricks around how do I bounce back from adversity when I've been hit and kind of knocked down a little bit, like so many of us have. And the idea that, you know, we don't have to be stuck in this permanent cycle if it's feeling a bit hopeless or difficult. And then the third one is, so now we've gone reflect. So we know where we are. We've done the reframe, which is, okay, now we've got a more resilient, more positive sort of mindset. Now we get to focus forward on our goals. So refocus is about, where do we want to be? Where do we see ourselves as human beings? And I think we've sort of pressed pause lately on life. Many of us have, and there's sort of this wait and see approach. And I think when we allow ourselves the opportunity to look to the future in a very hopeful and expansive way, that there's so much energy we can gain from that. And that's a really big part of feeling fired up, whether it's personally or professionally. And so in refocus, really, I go through this whole goal setting process, which is as simple as writing down some of these very expansive ideas you have for yourself. And you'll see how the way that the brain works, there's a lot of science in this book. And the way that the brain works, if you write it down and you align yourself in a particular trajectory, that it will work in subconscious ways to get you there. But you have to be brave enough to sort of set that goal, right? And then we get to reconnect, which is one of my favorite parts. And quite frankly, before the pandemic, I'm not sure that I made this a priority. So in reconnect, the whole goal is around connecting to those people around you who lift you up and fire you up. And so those could be your colleagues, your friends, your family, and just really intentionally tune into that important relationship. And lots of different ways to do that. But one really easy way is just to send 5 texts to 5 different people that you maybe haven't talked to for a while, and just say, hey, I'm thinking of you. Because sometimes, especially in this pandemic, if it's been 3 months, 6 months, 18 months, and you haven't reached out, you sort of feel like, oh, I can't, you know? So just to do that and go, I'm thinking of you, and open that door. Then the 5th R is reveal. So this is very exciting to me. This is about revealing sort of your inner creativity, which is often underestimated. Many educators, people in general, sort of think they're not creative, but I think creativity is the most human element of expression. I really do. And so that can be the way that you cook your meals, the way that you garden, the way that you learn new things like making bath bombs or any candles, or write, any of those types of things. And so I offer some very practical ways to access your own creativity. So in a nutshell, those are the 5 R's.
Oh, I love it. I love the system. I love that so much of this is a little bit linear. I know it's not overly so. It's not a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in every case, but I love that plan, that strategy. And I know in the book you include a number of very practical suggestions and tools. And even that, if I can take you back to this, to the beginning for a moment, when you talked about the tuning in and listening to your body, I'm not very good at that. Do you include some tools that, I think you mentioned a checklist, right? That sort of allows us to check in with our overall health?
Absolutely. So I think it's about consistency, and I think it's also about letting go of that perfectionism too, that there's only one way to do it. Sometimes I like to journal, and sometimes I don't, and sometimes it doesn't fit my life at the time. And I'm a big fan of putting a question in my head and going for a big walk. Sometimes it's as simple as that, sort of tuning into your mind, but accessing it through your body. Often the self-care practices that we think of, bubble baths and whatever, those aren't necessarily the tools that we need to tune in. Sometimes it's about getting physical, and we can, going to the gym, even though a lot of them are closed right now, going to the gym, going for a walk, going for a run, a hike, connecting with another person who maybe is going through a similar thing to you. I think all of these things normalize our current state of being. Journaling is a really important way that I do tend to tune in if I'm feeling a bit untethered. And so I do have a lot of prompts in the book that just sort of remind you to sort of think about where am I at right now, and how can I access that? And I think, honestly, it's about getting into nature too, and tapping out of our very busy lives sometimes, and the tech, and turning off the phone for a little bit and just breathing. Because I think our nervous systems are on high alert right now. So we need to give ourselves that space to go, whew, like decompress a little bit and go, where am I right now? And who am I?
Yeah.
All of
Yeah.
those things. And I wanted to mention at the back of the book too, I have these roadmap, they're almost like they are blackline masters. And so they kind of sum up a lot of the deep work that we do in each chapter. And those are actually accessible on the Solution Tree website, and they're free. So you can actually go right on there and just get a taster if if some of your listeners wanted to do that and just kind of get a sense, because I think they're really helpful just as an access point.
So good. Thank you so much, Morgane. I'm thinking about the journaling, which sort of forces me into a headspace of, okay, take a moment. It forces that deep breath, like, okay, I'm putting aside everything else. I'm just going to focus. It slows me down, I guess is what I'm getting at. And then it forces me to sort of think about my breathing and just sort of collect my thoughts. And you're right. We can have those moments where we just go through whole days and we're not, especially if we've got parenting and other responsibilities going on in our world as well. So I think those are so helpful. So if you're just joining us, welcome. I want to drop a few of the comments. My friend Rochelle is saying hello from Facebook. Hi, Rochelle. Syed on LinkedIn. Great to have you here this morning. Roland from Ontario says, I love the idea of reconnecting to the outdoors, breathing in the fresh air and moving outside it. Wonderful. Syed adding a few claps there as well. Thank you so much. Yeah, getting outside is, especially with loved ones, if you do have kids at home, getting outside, going for that walk, it's doing so many good things, right, Morgane? I mean, we're getting that fresh air, and it's also sort of pulling us away from screens, and we can all have an old-fashioned conversation sometimes. Well, I've got a hard question for you, and I'm thinking about educators out there who really, and we see them on our professional Twitter, we see them in other places, really at the bottom, and sometimes it sounds really dire. We hear comments like, oh, I dread coming to work every day, and I just wish the world, I want to disappear into my bed and that kind of thing. And so I just wonder, is the advice ever different to those educators? Instead of the 5 R's, do you start to maybe have that conversation about going elsewhere?
Well, okay, I love this question because I think we are seeing a lot of teacher attrition right now. Life is hard as a teacher, I think, especially hard in the United States. It's very, very challenging, and there are a lot of demands. And I would say because our collective nervous system is on high alert right now, our students as well, though, we're seeing a lot of these really troublesome behaviors, which can add a lot of stress to the classroom management. And that can be, when you go in and you're going to be faced with an onslaught of challenges, and that can be really, really overwhelming. So I would say that the framework of the 5 R's is really applicable to anybody, and it doesn't have to be teachers, right? So it's really about getting your firm foundation in who you are as a person first, and whether you stay in the classroom or not. And I actually have a framework in the book around quitting. And it was inspired by Seth Godin and also inspired by a guy named Chase Jarvis, who's a creative, and he had a wonderful podcast. And he came up with these 2 questions, which I'd like to offer your audience because I think they're really helpful. So if you're a teacher right now and you're struggling, you can ask yourself, and this is really with any decision that you make, is it working? Number 1. And do I love it? And within that matrix, you can kind of go, yeah, it's working in terms of it's paying my bills. I know what I'm doing. I don't have to retrain. There's a lot that's working there, but I don't love it. Or, you know what, it's not working. Like I come home and I'm a mess every day and I don't love it. And so you kind of have to go through, or yes, I love it, but it's not really working. And, you kind of go through. And I think when you get to the place where you're like, it's not working and I don't love it, then you have to make some changes. Or if you don't quite love it, but it's working, how can you reconceptualize your job so that it does work for you? When you look outside into the general world, teaching and the skills that we bring to teaching can be widely applicable in many different areas. So to be a classroom teacher is one thing, but I think there comes a point where if you dread it so much, maybe it's not helpful to the students, that you're serving. Maybe it's okay to go looking for university jobs where you could you could do more on, a supporting adults role, or maybe you can go and do sort of a coaching role. One thing I would say, if you are looking into doing your own projects and creative ventures, is that I wouldn't quit your day job right away. I would get your feet under you first, because I think there's sort of this idea that if we just jump off the cliff and, we burn the boats and we we dive into this creative venture, that it will immediately become successful, or it'll be easy to monetize. I think that can kind of spin you down deeper. So before you do quit, really consider, is it working, but maybe there's an element that I don't love? How can I access that problem and solve that problem around I don't love it? Why don't you love it? What is it about it? How could you still be a teacher, but then find an avenue that makes you love it again? It could be changing grades. It could be finding a new role. I think we sometimes feel so connected to that particular experience that we've always lived. What if you reimagined what it could be? Like asking yourself literally in a journal, what if I could do anything? And then just start every idea, every bullet point with, what if I could, what if I could, what if I could, and see if one of those ideas sparks a new approach. Because I think we don't have to be stuck we have one life to live. We don't have to be stuck in this thing that feels like it's not serving us, right? That's my perspective.
Yeah. Wow. Oh, that was so good for my heart. And I love the Matrix. I need to see the Matrix and check that out and tweet that out, because I think that's so simple but so powerful. Mm-hmm. Is it working? Is it working? And do I love it? And which of those is true, or both, and maybe neither? And when neither is true, maybe that's a signal that we need to change things up. In my conversations on the Teachers on Fire podcast, when I was doing more interviews and going deep on people's stories, that was something that came up, is that when people would really get to the end of their rope, sometimes it was a change. Yeah. That, they just had to move on to another school, try a different kind of position, mix things up, because really, what do we have to lose? As you said, it's our one life and one opportunity. So get a change, make a change. Don't stay stuck. I think that's what we're both saying to you this morning. If you're joining us and that describes you, it's not working and you don't love it, make some kind of a change to shake things up a little bit.
Would it be okay if I added one little piece? I'd say also that feeling of, when you're feeling kind of stuck or even resentful or like restless, I think sometimes that's information. We don't have to judge it as bad. It's information. It's information that tells us, hey, I'm ready for a change, or this isn't necessarily aligned with where I want to be. And that's really powerful. Like, we have to listen to that. We don't need to dive off the cliff and do something risky, but go, oh, okay, like tuning into that and honoring that we feel restless in that. Because I think I have felt like that myself. And many of the goals that I had for myself that came out of that restlessness have put me in just a different position with new opportunities, because I pursued them. I didn't give up my teaching job, but I pursued them. And so I think that's an important piece too. Yeah. So good. Recognizing those feelings. As you said, it's information. It's not something we need to feel shame about. It's information that we can act on. We can actually do something about. Well, I just want to say quickly, again, a huge thank you if you are joining us live this morning or on the replay. Thank you so much for entering into this conversation. Let us know your thoughts as we continue on here. And the single best way that you can support my work is to subscribe on the YouTube channel. Join me on my campaign to 1,000 subs. Well, thinking of wellness and self-care, Morgane, as we start to wind down, this is a question I love to ask everyone, basically, who comes on the roundtable, but I'm especially interested in asking you. I think I heard a couple of answers on your conversation with George Couros, but maybe you'll surprise us. Thinking of wellness and self-care, what is one app, routine, or daily practice that gives you clarity and recharges your fire? I'm going to cheat a bit, because I have, in the book, I have a self-care action list, which I wrote, for myself. And I think it's almost like a prescription for wellness, right? So I've drilled down to 5 things that I really love to do, that if I do those 5 things and I still feel crappy, then I need to go and figure my stuff out. But generally, if I access these 5 things, I feel better. So one of them is working out in some way, going for a walk, Visiting with friends is a huge, huge part. I have a friend that I have 6 a.m. calls with every single Monday. We call them TGIMs. Thank goodness it's Mondays, believe it or not.
Nice.
To start the week off and do some goal setting. Every single Monday we do this. So that's another important piece. And then, and then just getting some journaling done. And so, and then of course, I love listening to podcasts and reading. So those things, if I kind of go down the list, that makes me feel replenished. And I would urge anybody to sort of take stock of what are the 3 to 5 things that when you do them, you generally feel better. And of course, there's so much going on that we can't control, but you can control a self-care action list, and you can do those things within the comfort of your home. And you can actually affect that mental sort of well-being and your general outlook to a certain point. And so that would be my answer. Kind of a cheat because there's like 5 things, but yeah.
Well, and you mentioned listening to podcasts, and you are also a podcaster. Would you say that the creative work, I feel like this is a no-brainer, but doesn't that creative work give you a lot of fire too? I feel like that's, some people look at what I'm doing on the weekends and so on, and they feel like it to them, maybe it feels like a burden. And I just explained to them, actually, this is what gives me my fire. This adds so much to my week. Do you feel the same?
Absolutely. There's sort of this like urgency within me to do the creative work. So whether it's the writing, whether it's the reaching out to new podcast interviewer or interviewees, editing the work, like I do all of that as well. And I love it. And also I've given myself permission to sort of ebb and flow with my consistency, because I've got like 200 episodes or something, but I'm part of a podcasting network. And often there's this fear that if you step off the train of that consistency, that something bad will happen. And I think that just giving myself some breathing room around that has been really, really helpful. And then being able to dive back in as I feel it makes sense, so that's been so amazing. And I love creative work. I think I lose myself in it. I get into that state of flow where time passes. I don't know where it's gone. And I do think that actually, there's research around that says when you can get into creative flow, that is sort of the happiest state of mind that a human being can be in. And so if you can find that ability to find flow, it's a gift. It's just so much fun. I love it.
Well, that sounds like some Seth Godin wisdom right there. I know you've got a good connection with him, and I'm sure he would say something similar. And absolutely. Consider these activities if you're looking for another source of fire. It may not be around education. Maybe you want to start a podcast about BC real estate or some other topic that is interesting you, but look for those creative outlets as well. Well, Morgane, whose voices are inspiring you right now? Is there an author, a speaker, a podcaster, or other creator that is really lighting your fire and encouraging you right now?
Oh my goodness. It's so hard to answer this question because I'm so inspired by so many people, yourself included. I think I look at some of the work that like Dave Burgess is doing. He's a publisher. He's put all those, Teach Like a Pirate, the whole series, and many, many more. I'm always inspired by his work. I think that he's got amazing energy. Dr. Jody Carrington, I've had her on the show about 3 times. She's just an absolute firecracker and such a champion for teachers. And she's got she's just so unique in her approach that I think it's really appealing to people. So I love her. I've got a few friends back home. Trevor McKenzie, who's put out, the Inquiry Mindset books. He's incredible. He's been such a mentor to me too, and really helpful. Lisa Bayless, she just put out a book about mindfulness for educators. Wonderful educator and also a very close friend. And then I'd say Kristen Wiens as well. She does the illustrations. You'll see her on Twitter. She's like a sketch note artist, but she's also, she's just out on the district right next to me. And she's an incredible mentor with inclusion and just such a wise person. So I lean heavily on my mentors, and I just love developing those connections. So there's a few names for you.
Oh, absolutely. I love it. And some great stars there in Victoria. I really appreciate Kristen Wiens you mentioned as well. And I've noticed her sketchnoting around the social media. And then speaking of social media, I mean, Trevor has really stepped up his Instagram game. If you're familiar with the work of Trevor McKenzie, really inspiring educator as well. Another great one to connect with. Well, Morgane, going back for a moment. Oh, and I wanted to mention Roland made a comment. Let's see if I can pull it up here. He said, I agree that the flow state is the place to be. And Roland, I know you do a weekly show there from Ontario, and I'm sure you find the same about bringing back that fire. Well, Morgane, again, going back to the creative work for a moment, is there a project that you are focused on right now? Is there another book coming out? Is there are there some big plans for the podcast this year? What is, I know there's got to be something on your horizon right now.
Yeah, well, actually, a lot of people have asked about a second book, and I'm kind of like, oh my gosh, I'm just sort of,
give me a break.
Well, I just came out last month, right? So
yeah.
For me, I'm just sort of pressing pause. I don't feel the urgency to pop another book out yet, but I know that I have a lot of content, in there. I think right now what I'm focusing my energy on is speaking and professional development that kind of comes from the book and being able to share the work in a really deep way with educators and schools. Cool. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that's really awesome. Where I'm focusing my energy. Yeah.
All right. Well, if you are watching and you are buying into the 5 R's as a helpful strategy for replenishing wellness and reigniting passion, check out Morgane's speaking engagements and availability, right, Morgane? I'm sure we can send them to the website. And that's actually how we're wrapping up here. Let us know how we can connect and where. What are the best places? Where are you putting out work these days?
You bet. Yeah. So I have a website, smallactbigimpact.com, with a number of different things, including, if you're an educator, lots of kindness resources and lessons. And then I'm quite active on Instagram at smallactbigimpact. You can search my name as well, Morgane Michael, and then Twitter, Facebook, Morgane Michael, and just feel free to add me. And I've got a YouTube channel, Small Act Big Impact as well. And I'm on LinkedIn. Like, I'm kind of across the socials. So if it's not Small Act Big Impact, it's Morgane Michael, and you can find me fairly easily. And then my book, From Burnt Out to Fired Up, you can get that on Amazon or directly through the publisher Solution Tree as well. So hopefully I get to connect with some of you again.
This has been simply wonderful. Thank you so much, Morgane, for sharing some of your weekend with me. I know out here on the left coast, it's pretty early. That's giving up a bit of a sleep in. So I really do appreciate it. Thank you so much. And can't wait to get into the book. I hope others will check it out as well. Take care and keep that fire for learning burning bright.
Thank you so much, Tim. I really appreciated being on the show. Thank you.